Hey guys, tonight we begin with the remarkable lives, and sometimes even more remarkable deaths, of medieval men. And before you panic, no, this isn't a story about knights in shining armor, jousts, or men dying gloriously in battle. Oh no. This is about men dying much closer to home, in bed, at the dinner table, sometimes at the bottom of the well, and the women who made it happen. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. First, do the ritual. You know it. Take a second to like the video, but only if you actually enjoy this kind of thing. Don't pity like me. I want real commitment, not medieval marriage levels of obligation. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. Because there is something strangely magical about seeing someone from New York listening at 3 a.m., and someone from Dublin nodding off at 9 p.m., and someone in Manila probably listening while eating breakfast. Together, across the centuries and across the world, we are all about to hear a bedtime story about women who, well, let's just say they were not afraid to rearrange their lives. Now, congratulations, you are a woman in the Middle Ages. Don't get too excited, this is not a win, there's no prize. You've basically been dropped into a world where your body is public property, your soul is under constant surveillance, and your personal freedom is somewhere between none and only if your husband allows it. You can't vote, you can't own land, unless you're a widow, which will become important later, and you definitely can't file for divorce. You can, however, be married off at 12, survive childbirth if you're very lucky, and spend the rest of your life making soup. But here's the twist. When you're trapped in a system that gives you no power, sometimes the only power you get is creative problem solving. And by creative problem solving, I mean murder. Don't look at me like that. I'm not encouraging you. I'm just saying, if your husband is a violent drunk who eats all the food, squanders the wages, and beats you for sport, you don't have many options. You can pray, you can cry, or you can wait until he's had too much ale, watch him stumble into bed, and make sure he doesn't wake up.
And here's the thing. It happened. More often than you'd think. Because the Middle Ages were messy. Life expectancy was short. Everyone was sick half the time. People died of fevers, accidents, or just because the stars said so. So if your husband suddenly keeled over at 34 after supper, who could say what really happened? Bad stew, God's will, or maybe a wife who had simply had enough. Now keep in mind, this is not a story about evil women twirling mustaches and cackling. No, these were ordinary women in extraordinary circumstances. Women who were told every day that they were weak, sinful, and second class, but who sometimes found loopholes in a world stacked against them. Loopholes that smelled like arsenic. Loopholes that looked suspiciously like accidents. Loopholes that somehow always ended with them being widows, and finally, free. Of course, not every attempt went smoothly. Some were caught, some were punished. Some were burned, drowned, or locked in towers. But many more, they got away with it. Literally. They learned that if you cried at the right moment, or if the neighbors hated your husband too, or if the priest was tired and didn't want to write another report, you could slip right through the cracks of medieval justice. And that's what tonight's story is about. It's about the quiet, overlooked, scandalous, whispered tales of medieval women who chose survival over submission, sometimes with a smile, sometimes with a spoonful of poison, and sometimes with nothing more than a well-timed push. So tuck yourself in. Let the torches gutter in the distance. Imagine the creak of a wooden bed, the smell of smoky stew, the sound of villagers gossiping just outside your window. Because tonight, we're not talking about queens or saints. We're talking about ordinary wives, widows, and sometimes mistresses, and the extraordinary ways they got away with murder. Welcome to How Medieval Women Got Away with Murder sometimes literally.
Poison was the medieval woman's best-kept secret, not because it was easy to find, but because it was everywhere. Your garden? Deadly nightshade. Your stew? Toss in a little hemlock. Even the churchyard had yew trees that could drop a man faster than a sword. And the beauty of it? In an age before forensics, poison looked a lot like life. Husband drinks wine, husband vomits, husband dies. Cause of death? God willed it. No suspicion required. Some women became infamous for this. A pinch in the porridge, a sprinkle in the ale, a smile across the table as their husband slowly realized the soup didn't love him back. And if anyone asked, well, clearly it was God's punishment, or bad bread, or the devil. Convenient scapegoats, all. But maybe you weren't a poison kind of girl. Maybe you preferred a little theater. In that case, accidents. Your husband gets drunk and stumbles near the well. Oops, did he slip? Your husband climbs a ladder to fix the roof. Oops, did it wobble? Your husband picks a fight and passes out by the fire. Oops, did the house burn down? The medieval world was full of sharp corners and sudden ends. If you nudged fate along a little, who could tell? Here's the kicker. Being a widow in the Middle Ages was often the best gig a woman could get. Suddenly, you could own land. You could run a business. You could decide for yourself. Some women stayed single on purpose, guarding their independence like a dragon guards gold. Others remarried, carefully this time, maybe to a man with fewer bad habits and more sheep. In fact, widows were sometimes so powerful that men complained about them constantly. Bossy, unruly, too independent. Translation? A woman who no longer had to ask permission. Of course, not every plot was smooth. Some women overdid the poison. Some got caught whispering plans to neighbors. And medieval courts were brutal. If you were accused, you might be put on trial by ordeal, boiling water, hot irons, drowning tests. If you survived, God had spared you. If you didn't, well, that answered the question, didn't it? But still, enough women succeeded that the stories lingered. Whispers in taverns, gossip in marketplaces, warnings muttered by priests. So why does this matter now? Because these stories are not just about murder, they're about survival, about women in impossible circumstances finding ways to carve out a little power, even if it meant carving it out of their husband's supper. They remind us that history isn't just kings and battles. It's kitchens, bedrooms, and quiet rebellions. It's women who were told they had no choices and who went ahead and made choices anyway. So as you drift off tonight, imagine the flicker of a candle in a drafty medieval cottage. Imagine a woman stirring soup a little too slowly, humming to herself, while her husband snores in the next room. Imagine her weighing her choices, obedience or freedom. And imagine her deciding that sometimes freedom wins. Good night, sleep well, and remember, history has teeth, but it also has whispers, and tonight you've heard both.